make things that we think eternity, we make things, all kinds of things. Amazing. But as you say, it depends.
Yeah, it depends. That's what I just know. But see, the thing is, because we don't really think about the future. Because that's our problem. As black people, we don't think about the future, right? About all this now. So, you know that you won't live to you, but you think about your family and your family's family. We don't think like that. That's bad for even to me.
But I think for musicians as well, when they start and so on, you know, you can't think how big it's going to be. You can't.
No, well, think about it. Like me, I've been around so many. I've seen people this way, and it can't be going and it can't be coming back. And I've been right in the level.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tanya Dyson, Executive Director of Memphis Sound Collaboratory, and I'd like to welcome you out to yet another panel discussion on the much needed information that you all as artists need. So thank you for chiming in, most importantly, and thank you for taking the first steps and taking charge of your careers and making sure that you do everything within your power to maintain control of your music and also the money to be made off of it. And I guess regulating yourself as a business. So give yourself an applause and a hand clap of all of that good stuff. I'm really excited today about the panelists that we do have attending this workshop. If you have released music or if you plan on releasing music, of course, if you've been following any of the copyright laws or any of the advocacy that the local Grammy chapter was doing here as far as specific changes that were made, you will know about the MLC. And you also know, in order to deal with the MLC, your metadata has to be correct and in place. And so we will be dealing with those two aspects today. So at this point, I am going to disappear. And what I would like to do is go ahead and call up our two panelists. Of course, we have George Monger, who is here today with Connect Music, as well as Dae Bogan with the MLC. And we'll actually start with George, because what we'll do is talk about metadata and its importance and what you all need and as far as what it needs to look like. And then that will lead to with Dae talking about the MLC and how you begin to pay, because that data that you enter in is all a part of tracking and how you will know where your music is and royalties and different things like that. So everything is connected today. So no further ado, I'd like to call up our panelists.
Hello.
Tanya, hi, George.
All right, Tanya, thank you for hosting this webinar today, and Dae, thank you for making time with everything going on with the Mechanical Licensing Collective. Tanya, what you're doing with the Memphis Slim Collaboratory is nothing short of fantastic for our community and necessary to bring expertise like Dae to the table today.
Thank you.
And so just a little bit background for those that are joining us today. From a music distribution world, we have, a lot of times artists that want to create music go online, fill out kind of some basic information, the product release date, get a UPC, get an ISRC, upload their tracks, and they press go. But they're missing a few things that I thought it'd be great for us to talk with Dae about today. So maybe we should start, Dae, with kind of your role, your background, what the MLC is, and let's get into the mechanics of how this thing works.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. You know, I love talk. So this is a good platform. My world has been empowering music creators in a number of ways for many years. In the last 6 or 7 years has been really around helping music creators understand the rights that they have as it pertains to their contributions to music, the entitlements that they earned as that music is used, and the ways in which their music earn income and how they get paid. And all of that is tied to how their music shows up in the industry or in the ecosystem. You mentioned distributors, which is really part of the first phase of that process, is making sure that you have a distribution partner that is legit, first of all, and capable of providing the set of data that is necessary to be disseminated in the music industry. But before that, it's really understanding what is this information in the first place. What is metadata?
Right.
What do I need to capture? How do I capture it? Where do I store it? How do I get it to the right places? And how does it ultimately affect my my income? Because when you're writing a song, or you're not thinking about metadata, you're thinking about the story or the emotion or whatever
Right.
it is that drove you to the idea for that song. You're not thinking about the type of standardized metadata information that is going to be necessary further down the road when that music begins to earn royalties.
Right.
But it is important to at some point stop and think about that, or to have a process in place to capture the proper data. So what is metadata, right? So that's the first question, like what is metadata? Well, it's information about your music. And there's different sets of metadata. There's metadata that describes your music, that helps with search and discoverability. There's metadata that identifies the ownership within the music, which will help with allocating royalties to the proper parties. There's metadata that is more towards marketing, like who's the label, who's the artist, what's the title. So there's different groups of metadata and they have different purposes, but that information needs to be captured because at the end of the day, this information about your music is what helps your music gets discovered. It's what helps your music gets properly identified for royalty purposes. It's what helps you as an individual creator get paid and allocated to. And when it becomes missing, then it affects one or more of those functions of being a part of the music industry.
Right. And so I think kind of taking from that, you go onto whatever your preferred distributor is, you load up your artwork, it's a single, you load up the song title, some other descriptive information. There's an important piece that a lot of times we hear that streaming service X is not paying a rate that's fair or only 0.004 cent per stream. But there are actually three other revenue sources, more than what just comes to the distributor. There are other revenue sources. So, for example, the mechanical license, the public performance, and in some cases, if you're talking about a micro synchronization opportunity, say on a YouTube or some of the other emerging UGC platforms, that can have real impact.
Yeah. So, I mean, what people need to know, what artists need to know, is that when you create music, although it's your art, right? It's an expression of your art, but it's also an asset that can be sold, lended, licensed, leased, so forth. And that asset is exchanged and monetized using the set of information about that asset, the metadata. So when you upload music into the music ecosystem, you're saying, okay, I want to take this piece of art and commercialize it.
Right.
I want to take this art and put it into the industry and use it as a business. So that's important because then, okay, well, now there's a whole set of business practices that flows around that art. And a part of it is number one, for all the users of that asset, DSPs, digital service providers like Spotify and Apple, UGC, right, like you said, YouTube, or even Facebook. And it's well, how do we use this asset in our system? Like, what are we paying, or how do we pay? So the metadata is the information that music users need in order to properly utilize the asset, to properly meet their requirements under licensing and under copyright laws, such as making sure that they can identify the rights holders and pay the rights holders. So they require this information to meet their obligations.
Right.
And then they're required also for you as a creator to be paid. So we take a step back. We talk about the creator. Well, a creator, if I just start writing music and start performing music, I'm an artist, I'm a musician. I'm not yet a professional. I'm an artist who's creating music, and that's what I do. But when you want to enter an industry, there has to be a way to interact with that industry as a professional and as a business, what we call a rights holder or a music creator. And we use the industry uses standards. We use music codes. We use identifiers to identify the various parties to a particular work or recording. We use identifiers to distinguish one song from another song when the titles are the same. We use identifiers to distinguish different versions of a song embodied in different recordings, an acoustic version versus a studio version or a live version of the same song, right? We have to use.
And in that case, that would be the ISRC, right? To separate
ISRC.
The music video from the studio recording versus the acoustic. And, I know those that may be listening heard a lot of this from Clubhouse and some of these other places about who owns the ISRC and does that mean you own your copyright? And so, or does the distributor own it? So, I think that's something we probably could delve into a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, you need a lot of, there are different, it's as an artist, you have to sort of take time to unpack what it means to operate in the music industry. When you're a creator and you write the lyrics and you create the melody, and maybe if you're involved in production, and sometimes some artists are involved in mixing and mastering their own works, the full creative process, you don't necessarily see yourself as being these distinctly different contributors to the work. You just see, I created this. You don't see yourself as a songwriter versus a mixing engineer, for example. If you participated in both of those contributions to the work. But in the music industry, we are very fragmented in the sense that we need to identify the individual contributors to a work, musical work being the lyrics and the melody, and a sound recording being the master. So we need to identify all those contributors to that work so that those individual contributors can be paid based on their entitlements to that work. And based on how that work is used in the music industry and where those entitlements are triggered. So we use identifiers. So starting at the creator level for songwriters, we use what's called an IPI number, interested party identifier. So this is sort of like your ID in the music industry to identify your name. You can have multiple IPI numbers if you have multiple songwriter names and aliases or pseudonyms or so forth. So your IPI number is effectively one way to identify you as the individual, and you provide that information when you're registering the song to music rights organizations such as the Mechanical Licensing Collective. So registering a song to us or registering a song to another music rights organization that needs to know who is the writer and what is their IPI number. Then you have your publishing entity, which you may be the publisher or you may have a third-party publisher. That third-party publisher and your publishing entity will also have an IPI number. This is again as an identifier for that entity on that musical work. So now we've just addressed the musical work, just the contributors. So we identify the contributors with the IPI number. Then the musical work itself is identified with what's called an ISWC, an International Standard Work Code. Now this code is the unique identifier for this particular musical work. There may be 1,000 songs called Love in the Sky, but only one of those songs you wrote. And the way that we distinguish from the other 1,000 or 999 songs is by having an ISWC code that says, okay, this ISWC code is for your song, Love in the Sky, and then here are all the writers and publishers on that work identified by their IPI number. So now we have sort of this full profile of this song, the song ISWC code, and then the songwriters and publishers identified by their international interested party identifier. So that's the musical work side.
Right.
Then we go out and that musical work gets recorded by an artist for a record company. And now this recording is one version of that musical work. And that recording is identified by an ISRC code, International Standard Recording Code. So this International Standard Recording Code is basically the identifier for that version, so for that recording of that musical work. Now, if you go and give the song to another artist and they also record their own version, there's going to be another ISRC code for their particular version. So every version of this song that is recorded, whether it's recorded, let's say we go perform live and you have a live version that has a ISRC code, which is different from the studio recording version, which may be different from, kind of a stripped down acoustic version. And then maybe there's a music video of the song, and that music video itself will have an ISRC code separate from the sound recording. So all those different codes are ways to identify all these different variations of the work, so that when it goes out into the industry, on digital services, on UGC platforms, on download stores, and mobile apps and gaming apps, and it starts to be used, streamed, downloaded, played, playback, mixed up, and so forth. The platforms and the users can report back to the various societies that are collecting royalties for that usage, whether it's a PRO collecting royalties for performing rights, or us at the Mechanical Licensing Collective receiving royalties for digital audio mechanical royalties. So that usage, we receive that usage information and those royalties, but also the metadata associated with those works, so that we can go and match up to the proper payees.
So to summarize that, it's a ton of important information. The ISWC has a one-to-many relationship with ISRC. So I think the example that I know most folks use all the time is Dolly Parton's "I Will Always Love You." She wrote it back in '81, I believe. Mm-hmm. It was made more popular in '91 by Sony's Whitney Houston, and in that case, Dolly still gets paid every time that song plays, so long as the ISWC is associated with the ISRC that the distributor or label has assigned and the proper metadata is attached.
Right, exactly. So in this case, it's actually a really good example. I use it as well in my class, but Dolly Parton also owned the publishing company. So so she not only gets paid as a writer, but she gets paid as a publisher for that song. And every time it's performed by anyone, there's a lot of different artists have performed it since Whitney Houston, and it's been used in TV shows and karaoke and just everywhere. So that's an example of it was in 1981 that Dolly Parton put out the original, and then 10 years later the cover, which was used for Bodyguard, was put out by RCA with Whitney Houston, and Dolly Parton gets paid for that because she's a songwriter and the publisher. So that's why it's important to have those identifiers, because anyone can do a cover of your song once it's been published, and you have to get paid as a songwriter for the copy and distribution of your musical work, which is part of the mechanical royalty schema.
Right, got it. And so I think that for folks, actually before I go there, let me just say, so we just ran our January statements from the Mechanical Licensing Collective. So hats off to you guys for standing up the MLC, collecting the uncollected from the streaming services, and publishing a statement. We ingested and audited this morning, went through flawlessly. So hats off to the team over there for putting that royalty statement together. And I thought it was interesting. I was reading a headline, I think it was yesterday, that 24 million of the 40 million was paid out. And so what it, to me, identified as the great work that the MLC is doing, we still got to impress upon our creators that they need to do more in connecting to the MLC to collect, right? Not just the if you're the artist and you co-wrote, but the producers and others who are in those studio sessions, because it sounds like 60% of the income was still available to be collected as of that January statement. So I think if we can maybe dig into, it really starts in the studio.
Yeah. It starts in if you're getting the studio, I mean, sometimes people are, recording in their bedrooms. So whatever is considered your studio, wherever you're recording. But in my mind, it starts with the definition of, a copyright, right? Or not necessarily the definition of copyright, but the definitive action at which a copyright is secured, which is to fix a creative work in a tangible form. So if you're recording or writing lyrics down on a piece of paper, or recording a melody, at that point you're creating a copyrighted work, and at that point you should start to collect the information about that copyrighted work, including who contributed to that work. If we're in a studio and there's 5 of us in there and we're just sort of jamming and coming up with something, very organically, and throwing lyrics out and lines out and stanzas and so forth and verses, and we're not really keeping track of who contributed what. We're just all in there, in the studio, kind of just making something happen. That happens a lot, right? It's organic. It's just this collaboration. But at some point, you have to sit down and say, okay, we need to come up to an agreement on what is our ownership to this work that we just created collaboratively, so that we can then go out and properly administer the work, meaning to register the information about our ownership to societies like the MLC, so that when we receive usage statements and royalties from services, we can apply that to the proper collection splits, shares that has been pre-agreed upon, so that you're not in negotiation after the royalties have already been collected. That can be a mess.
And so then I think let's talk about the sources of income in the digital, the streaming business. And so I release a work as an artist, and the song is played, one time. So that one play has generated a royalty on the sound recording that is paid to the distributor, and the distributor pays to the artist. If I'm a co-writer on that record or producer on that record, I'm entitled to other incomes. And so I think if we can kind of talk about where we were when you and I first had a chance to meet, and Section 115s and notice of intents were just thrown out there from the streaming services, and they hoped that that they were able to find the creator, to where we are now after the passage of the Music Modernization Act of 2018.
Sure. So before October 12, 2018, we had a schema where if I'm a music user, like a digital service provider, a streaming service, and a distributor uploaded recordings to my platform to be made available to the public, I would need to notify the publishers and or their copyright owners in the musical works that are embodied in the sound recordings, that I have, I intend to obtain what's called a compulsory mechanical license for the purposes of distributing and making available the sound recording, the musical work for streaming. So that process was, a service had to go out and identify somehow the publishers and songwriters in that particular musical work, and then somehow find their address, and then somehow send them a notice called NOI, Notice of Intent. The long term was Notice of Intent to obtain a compulsory mechanical license. This is this is information in Section 115 of the U.S. Copyright Act. So this process has been going on for decades. This Section 115, but an electronic version of sending these filings out began in 2016, and in 2016 we began on electronic bulk filings of these notices, which just blew up the number of notices that were being filed on a regular basis to the millions of notices a month that were being filed on the Copyright Office because the rights holders, some rights holders were not identified. Now, for rights holders that are identified, a lot of those rights holders worked already with third-party agents that aggregated publishing information and made it available to DSPs to make the process of filing these notices more efficient for the publishers that they represented. But a great deal of independent artists who are self-published were not a part of that structure, and their notices often were sent to the United States Copyright Office because that was the requirements of the statute. Was that if you cannot find the copyright owner in the public records of the Copyright Office, then their notice can be sent to the Copyright Office. So that meant millions of notices were being sent to the Copyright Office, and it was really impossible to search in any kind of meaningful way to see if you had a notice. And then the second question is, like, what do you even do if you have a notice? Like, how do you even respond to that?
Right.
So this created a very quick way of establishing unmatched royalties, mechanical royalties associated with the usage of sound recordings that could not be matched to copyright owners. And we call that like black box, kind of the buzzword for short. So black box royalties are kind of royalties that would accrue based on the usage of sound recordings, but they would not be paid out to the proper payees if they could not be identified. So the Music Modernization Act, one of the three kind of overhauls that it did, the Title I, there's Title I, there's Title II, and Title III, but Title I is the Musical Work Modernization Act. And what that did was do away with this one-by-one notification, NOI notification to rights holders, and instead created a blanket license for digital service providers who were eligible to operate under the blanket license. So that meant that, you know, if you're eligible to operate under the blanket license and you choose to do so, then all of the songs that are uploaded in your system are covered under the blanket license as long as you follow the provisions of that of the terms of that license. So that means to, you know, create usage statements, to send us to MLC, to submit royalties, to calculate royalties, or request an invoice and to submit that to the MLC, to make payments on a timely matter, to also transfer over historical unmatched royalties from all the unmatched usage prior to the launch of the or the availability date of the license, which was January 1st. So all of that happened and made available now this new process where if I'm a digital service, I can operate under the blanket license so that all of the songs that are uploaded to my system are covered by the blanket mechanical license, and I can simply, you know, submit reports and payments to one party that's responsible for paying out these digital audio mechanical royalties, as opposed to trying to track down literally millions of parties and paying them small pieces of income.
Well, and that's a great point. I think we should go and take a few questions. I do, before we do that, though, I want to just clarify a couple of things you unpack there. So one, for those that might not know, Connect Music, we're a music distribution pub admin company. So I get a chance to see all sorts of data as it comes out of streaming services and from collection agencies around the globe. And so, in fact, I was looking this morning and you mentioned one of the provisions of accurate and timely reporting. I noticed in your financial reporting, there's actually a late penalty in the accounting from the DSP. So it not only do you guys mandate that, there's actually looks like is there some penalty that those DSPs, if they were late for payments, would be assessed?
I don't, off the top of my head, have these specifics.
We didn't plan this question.
Yeah, on that part, it's not in my wheelhouse. But I would imagine that the stakeholders who participated in writing the bill and advising the legislators who passed it would have wanted some incentive for DSPs to pay on a timely basis. So a penalty would make sense for being late.
Okay, and then to unpack the black box that you had mentioned, and I think this is good ahead of us heading to questions. When you think about this black box piece, we all saw the headline: $424 million moved from the various DSPs to the Mechanical Licensing Collective, and so that was so if they collect this by doing what they go to the MLC.com connect to collect. Can we kind of talk about that process to make sure their works are registered?
Yes. So music publishers, songwriters, composers, lyricists, CMOs in different territories can join the MLC by going to the MLC.com, clicking on the connect to collect button, and then beginning the process of ensuring that they're eligible. What's important to note is that self-administered songwriters, which are songwriters who own their publishing, who retain their rights to collect mechanical royalties in the United States, can also join directly for the purposes of them representing their catalog and being paid directly. The MLC does not take a commission, so 100% of the royalties that are earned flows through to the rights holders or the payees, where our operations are paid by the DSPs. So it's certainly a benefit to get paid on a monthly basis. 100% of the royalties are earned, and without any cut taken out.
And I know, and that's important as we think about some of the other agencies that do this type of work pre the passage of the Music Modernization Act. So those entities still exist. They're two predominant organizations or organizations that have been around for some time. So is there a data sharing agreement in between? Do I register at all three? Do I just focus at MLC? How does that, what would you recommend for the creator?
So, well, you must register your works with MLC, just like you must register your works with other music rights organizations.
Okay.
Now, we are mandated by the MMA to provide a bulk machine readable access to our database, which anyone can access. So those companies that you mentioned have access to our database via our relationships and via the mandate. Like anyone could come and get a sort of a subscription to our database and have access to our complete data.
Got it. No, that's perfect. Well, I'll stop for a second. Let's take some questions. Okay, so if someone is on a track with you and you are with the performance rights organization or PRO, does that other person have to be assigned to a PRO in order to get ISWC for that particular track?
So that's a great question, because the answer depends on who you talk to, right? So if you talk to a PRO, the PRO have their own requirements, such as all songwriters must be identified with an IPI number in order to assign an ISWC code to that musical work. But the global organization that actually creates and manages the ISWC states that anyone can get an ISWC for a musical work, regardless of membership to an individual PRO. So there's certainly a discrepancy that I've dealt with for many years, and a lot of publishers have dealt with, because if you are an artist and you're singer-songwriter and you're co-writing a song with someone who's not with the PRO, but you're with the PRO, and you go to register that work, that person without a PRO is going to show up as NS, no society,
Right.
and that work would not be assigned a ISWC code for a period of time, if at all.
Got it. More questions? Let's see. How does a handful of aggregator community upload 60,000 songs a day on a streaming platform? That's a fantastic one. In fact, I'll take that one. So Nathan, that is a great question. And so there are a couple things that are causing that to happen. One, the growth of the streaming business democratized the ability for independents to deliver music to streaming services. However, streaming services customers are actually the people who are listening to the advertisements or paying the subscription fee. And so what happens with kind of that handful of us that are in the distribution and aggregation community is we have certain standards we have to meet through the Digital Data Exchange, or DDEX. And what we do is we package up an ERN message containing some other implementation data and guidelines and deliver this message that we, if we're doing it right, we're doing some quality control on. We're delivering that into the streaming services, and then there's some acknowledgement back that the release was successful. And so the unique part about the 60,000 songs a day is that in addition to that, recent data from Goldman Sachs actually indicates that almost 80% of those who are streaming consumers prefer access to millions of tracks. So there's no time soon that we'll see this number start to shrink. In fact, we expect it to grow just through the continued growth of the technology platforms that are out there today. Okay, so let's jump. If there were no more questions, then we can jump back into it. So, I think I've been watching the process with the MLC, and I was reading the other day about the DQI, right? So similar to Nathan's point, what if I've got 5 songs and I'm growing my catalog, or I have a healthy size catalog? How am I going to keep up with all of this data? So there's the project that the Mechanical Licensing Collective has started called Digital Quality Initiative. It has, I believe, 5 partners, from maybe Song Trader, maybe, down to a local company here in Memphis, Tune Registry. And so can we kind of touch on what the DQI is, what those partners are, and delve deeper perhaps for some more questions?
Sure. So the DQI is actually a very innovative initiative, in my opinion, based on my experience with other music rights organizations. So the Data Quality Initiative is it's pretty much in the title. It's to make sure that the data is of quality, and that initiative requires participation from rights holders. It is a process by which rights holders can check their catalog in bulk against the data that we have at the MLC to identify any discrepancies, and then to act on those discrepancies, such as finding duplicate writers or missing writers, or missing IPI numbers, or missing or incorrect collection shares. So it's basically just a reference, right? You're checking your catalog against what we have to make sure that we have it correct based on your knowledge. And if it's not correct, then you have opportunities to fix it, to ensure that your works are being properly matched and the royalties are being paid out to the right parties. Now you can come directly to the MLC to participate in DQI, or you can participate in the DQI through a number of our DQI partners. And we have a DQI page on our website, and they list the partners. But they include the Stacks, who actually just did a webinar with this morning to demo their implementation. It also includes Blocker, and their own implementation. It includes Exactuals, it includes Music Data Services, and it includes Tune Registry. And each of these companies have their own implementation of DQI, and they make that available to their customer base based on the environment that they've set up. So there's different ways to participate in the DQI through those 5 partners, or directly with the MLC.
Got it. Okay. And so that is so just make sure you guys have that. There are 5 partners for this initiative. That is Blocker, Exactuals, Music Data Services, Tune Registry, and Vistex. So that's one. Perhaps if you're already using one of those services, be on the lookout for that. And then, so I guess you mentioned earlier, 100% payout to the creator. They sign up online. It's free. Works now. Can you identify works? I remember, again, I'm going back to maybe 2020, maybe 2019. I remember signing a waiver with Harry Fox Agency or something of that nature for data sharing agreement. So I think that's what stood up the MLC, right?
Right. So the MLC announced in 2019 that the Harry Fox Agency was selected as its vendor to help the MLC with its initial sort of infrastructure and build out, especially around a starting database of ownership information. So we acquired that database as a starting point for the MLC, and we've since been working on cleaning up that database, adding more work registrations, cleaning up missing data in the previous registrations. We sent out a solicitation to publishers who are already members of Harry Fox Agency to opt in to provide us with their account information, their banking information, their tax information, so that we can get publishers set up already with the MLC. We already had the data in regards to catalog, so this was more of a like, what is your payee information, so that when we have these payments ready in this month, our first distribution, we have the right bank accounts information, the right taxes information.
And so I bring that up for those that are listening, because if you were a co-creator, and let's say the song was written and the writer was at Sony or a mid-size or a smaller publisher, the song is likely there. So when you log into the MLC, you should probably start by searching for the registration first before you start creating a new one, because it may already be in the system, just your share is not there. Is that a reasonable expectation?
Yes, you should definitely search for your songs. It's a likelihood, if you have collaborators and if you're independent, that if you don't have a publisher, that your works may not have been registered, or that it has been registered, but it may be missing your shares. So that is possible, and we definitely recommend that people go and check.
Perfect. Well, Tanya, I think that if we can take any more questions, we can certainly reserve these last few minutes for opportunity to just take any questions that might have come up. Otherwise, Dae, thank you so much for spending time with us. And looks like we've got one from Ralph Foreign here.
Sure. So who would pay you? Who would pay you? MLC or music reports? Well, I mean, the question is, which royalty are you talking about? If you're talking about royalties that are earned from the blanket mechanical license, then that will be paid from the MLC. If you're talking about royalties that are earned from direct mechanical licenses that music reports helps facilitate on behalf of their customers, then that would be paid to you from music reports. The MLC operates exclusively with the blanket license, so no one else can administer the blanket license or collect and pay out mechanical royalties for the blanket license but us.
Is it that I can claim my recording if an aggregator loaded them not exclusively? Ideally, you only want one version of your sound recording out, right? So if I am an artist and I put out I Love You, when a listener goes to my artist page, if it's not exclusively distributed, there'll be multiple copies of it. And I'm not sure what real value that would have. So ideally, you'd want to keep that kind of in one place. And now, if you're migrating from one aggregator to another, you will leave your assets up at times, because what you want to have occur is what's called track linking. That is, I'm moving from distributor A to distributor B. So for 7 days, I'll keep that asset up so that if I have any playlisting or editorial support on the releases, I don't lose my track count. I don't lose it on playlist. And after that, you then would issue a takedown notice to distributor A that you were leaving.
Yep, absolutely. It's Harry Fox. You get the other mechanical royalties. The MLC, again, we operate exclusively with the blanket mechanical license. The Harry Fox and Music Reports administers or facilitates direct mechanical licenses, as well as bundled licenses that include mechanical rights or rights associated with mechanical royalties, as well as performance rights. So you would still work with those agencies because if your song is being used on Peloton or an in-store music video network, or I'm sorry, an in-store music service where they're streaming, depending on the usage, it may be a direct license. There's a lot of music apps, game apps, karaoke apps, apps for the gym that you would still need to have relationship with the agencies that represent those digital services.
Right. So it sounds like the takeaway there is MLC is important, the mechanical license and collective. Harry Fox agency is important. Music Rights Incorporated is important. All three of those are still important today. However, most DSPs are paying a blanket fee to the MLC, and we're responsible for its funding. And so through that, this was intended to encourage you to, one, have new information about the digital streaming business, how to collect all sources of income, where they lie, and to make sure that you're collecting everywhere.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your music is registered everywhere, because there are companies and organizations representing small, medium, and large companies, small, medium, and large rights holders. And if your music is earning royalties there, you need to make sure that you're properly set up to collect those royalties.
Absolutely. All right. Fantastic. So what are your websites, please? So if you are looking for the Mechanical Licensing Collective, their web address is themlc.com. You're looking for a distribution partner, connectmusic.com. We are an invitation-only platform. We do have a pretty healthy backlog of clients right now. So we're taking about 10 to 12 days to respond back because we're really intentional about the products we bring into our ecosystem. And it's for the very reason that we're talking today. We want to make sure that the data is accurate and everybody who participates gets paid. All right. Well, we did it in under an hour. I appreciate you again, Dae, for joining us. Tanya, thank you so much for the work you're doing with the Memphis Slim Collaboratory. It's necessary and needed in a musical city that we don't have to be the museum town anymore. We can be Memphis music now. I'm glad for everyone who joined, and I look forward to doing this again. And again, if you would like to donate to Memphis Slim House, please text GIVE to 901-350-6949 to donate to #SlimHouse. So I'm going to do that right now, and put mine in so I don't forget. Again, 901-350-6949 and text GIVE. All right, so I'm doing that now. Thank you. So we're turning that back over to you, Tanya.
Yes. So thank you so much for all of this wonderful information that you've been given. As you see, a lot of people are definitely appreciative of the information. So hopefully you did learn something from this. Again, if you missed a portion of this segment, you will be able to go back and replay it on our Facebook page, as well as on our YouTube channel as well. So thank you so much for that. And I guess with no further ado, if we don't have any more questions or anything like that from anyone, again, thank you all for for coming out. Please share this video with anyone that you feel like needs to know this information. And that's basically it. So thank you, everyone, and we will talk to you soon.
But see, the thing is, because we don't really think about the future. Because that's our problem. As black people, we don't think about the future, right? About all this now. So he knows that he won't live to even say it, but he thinks about his family and his family's family. We don't think like that. That's bad for our give it to me.
But I think for musicians as well, when they manage dance and so on, you know, you can't think how big it's going to be. You can't.
No, you well, think about it. Like me, I've been around so many. I've seen people this way, and when they pass me going in, they pass me coming back, and I've been right in this.